अस्सलाम वालेकुम। आज हमारी पॉडकास्ट पे आई एम इन द कंपनी ऑफ ग्रेटनेस। मोनिस रहमान पाकिस्तान की टेक हिस्ट्री में, सॉफ्टवेयर हिस्ट्री में प्रॉब्ली सबसे पुराना नाम है इन टर्म्स ऑफ जो लोग प्रोडक्ट्स कर रहे थे। 2-3 डेकेड से हम उनकी प्रोडक्ट्स को देख रहे हैं, तो ये लिस्ट तो बहुत लंबी है। उनका इंट्रोडक्शन कराने के लिए थोड़ा सा मैंने होमवर्क किया है। Monis Rahman is a serial entrepreneur. After graduating from University of Wisconsin and Stanford and working at Intel in the US, he started edaycare.com in 1997, which installed cameras at daycare centers. In 2001, he started Naseeb Networks, a social media website for Muslims, especially in the Middle East. He moved back to Pakistan in 2002 to take advantage of low cost of doing business here. He started Naseeb in 2001, and then in 2007 he started Rozee.pk, and soon it was generating more revenue than Naseeb. In 2009 he started Chalo.pk, which was inspired by Groupon, but later on Chalo.pk grew into easytickets.com and other projects of his. We'll talk about those projects later on. In 2016, he co-founded Finja with Kasif Shahid. Recently, in January 2021, Finja raised $9 million US investment. Finja, along with Dukan.pk, a white label e-commerce app store, are recent additions to his diverse portfolio. Before we move on, before I welcome my guest, I want to say one thing that, during the night, I had two fears about this podcast. One was that somehow my internet will go out, and the second was that Monis somehow will fail to appear. There's a history behind it because, the giants of the software industry, whenever I have contacted them, recently for this podcast, I contacted a few people. I did not hear any reply. They did not even, like, एक तो reply करके कहना कि we are busy, that is fine. We expected everybody is busy. But, a lot of people don't even give you that decency of replying and acknowledging your existence. So, I had to say that, and Monis, thank you very much for coming here. And
it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, as always.
Is that a fair comment that, giants of the industry, they somehow ignore a lot of, I understand a lot of people must be contacting you guys, but where do you draw the balance?
They can't, what happens at some point is you get so overwhelmed with inbound inquiries. So I can understand the people you're talking about. They probably get 15, 20 people a day engaging with them. And, you're on you're with your family and your kids having a dinner, and you get a message, you see it, you don't respond, then you move on, then you get another message. At some level, there's just so many inbound inquiries that for your own peace of mind, you have to drop the ball. And I know that's it's not a nice thing for anybody to hear. Well, I contacted this person, I never heard back. Reality is that human beings have only so much bandwidth. And at some point, they just start to drop the ball because they prioritize, and it just becomes humanly impossible to have conversations with 300-400 people at the same time and engage them, because then you don't have time for anything else, and it creates stress. So that's the other side of the coin. But I'm so glad that we were in touch early. I think you asked me to do this last week. I agreed, made a commitment. Here I am. And I think you're doing some very important work for the entire ecosystem.
Thank you very much. And I'm very happy that in my second podcast, I have got Monis Rahman with me. And you cannot imagine the level of happiness I feel that, I'm making it, the second interview is with the Monis. Okay, so let's dive into your past. I'm more interested in your past because the podcast is supposed to be recording our tech history and critically analyzing it. Okay, so it's very interesting. When I read about you last week, first time I found out you studied in the US. I didn't know that. And talk a little about your growing up in the US, and you were in the Stanford in the university of the Silicon Valley. And I've also read that you raised some money for Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, and you were in touch with them at that time. Talk a little about that and its influence on you and how you saw the world from that perspective.
I think I have been very fortunate. I've seen this online ecosystem grow twice in my life. Once in the US in the Valley, I was there from 1993 to 2003. In fact, earlier than 93. I graduated in 93, but I was doing my internship at Intel. And then I started working at Intel after I graduated. I was making microprocessors with some amazingly smart people, the people who invented the microprocessor, the people who invented EEPROMs, flash memory. And I was working side by side with them. So it's just a tremendous learning experience when you have very, very smart people you work with. One can't help but, absorb a bit of that. And I think it was a tremendous learning. But during that time, Valley mein, Intel microprocessors, hardware, which is my core area of expertise, were very hot. This was what was growing the computing industry. The computers were growing and becoming more accessible to individuals. They were moving from mainframe to mini to PCs. And that whole journey was very interesting to watch, because very quickly, as these computing devices became lower cost and became more widely available, the shift happened very quickly to software and internet. The internet started growing, and we saw tremendous possibilities with what the internet would do. It was a distribution channel. All of a sudden, you could have these interactive mediums without installing software. You go to a website and you could get content. And from content, then software programmers said, well, we can make this interactive content. We can plug in databases. These were the early days. It was just amazing when you plugged a database in a software programming language to intercept a static web page. That was a dynamic web page. It was a big deal. Do you have a dynamic site or a static site? Those were the days. Or फिर उसके साथ साथ saw.com start. I was in the San Francisco Bay Area working, and I saw all of a sudden about $1.5 billion being invested in that small area, about 30 square mile radius. Every month, about $1.5 billion was being pumped into these startups, which were going to change the world. They're going to replace brick and mortar with online version, online shoe store, online pet food, online grocery, online bookstore. So all of a sudden, these massive giants who had invested a lot of money creating very large brick and mortar enterprises nationally were being challenged by these young kids who knew how to write software that ran inside a web browser and did interactive things. And a lot of investment came, and we learned a lot, because it was the first time the internet was really invented and working at play. And I was part of that journey. I remember when Hotmail was started, I was there. I was speaking with the founders. It was a very small area with Google and so many startups. These were conversations that you would have when you would meet people. So I saw that whole evolution when the internet started growing, when VCs came in, when the bets that were made were actually wrong because we didn't understand how things would play out. So a lot of dot-coms crashed because the valuations were too high. Money came in with the expectations that it would replace its equivalent in the offline model, and it never did. And then those companies couldn't raise other rounds, and they were run by young, experienced, crazy people. So that was the evolution. And then it learned, the whole ecosystem learned what works, what isn't working. So I saw that happen. And I moved back to Pakistan, and I was back at square one. I moved back to Pakistan in 2003.
In the Valley, I have a couple of questions. Talk about a few inspiration of startups that really caught your imagination at that time. And maybe if you can give a couple of interactions with the great people there that really ignited things for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are lots of them. Hotmail was one, because all of a sudden this web-based email, it was a crazy idea. Now it seems, of course, email's on the web. Where else do you expect email? There was never web-based email that you could access from anywhere, and you just, log into a browser. It was revolutionary, and it grew so quickly. Hotmail became the largest provider of email in Sweden without even trying or really having any emphasis on Sweden or knowing that they were the largest provider in Sweden. And इस तरह की चीजें बार-बार होती रही हैं. PayPal, the guys who started PayPal were friends, and when we'd go out in the evenings and hang out with friends, these guys would be there. And I remember at that time, PayPal was built on a very interesting hardware, which predates the smartphone. It was called the Pilot, the Palm Pilot. I don't know how many people know about the Palm Pilot.
Heard
The
about
Palm
it,
Pilot was the first PDA, and it had this way to transmit information from one pilot to another. You could transmit your V card, like your business cards could be transmitted across these devices, and it had your contact list and all of that stuff. And all of the hip and trendy people who wanted to have the latest stuff would be playing with these Palm Pilot devices. And what the PayPal founders would do, I remember, was they would transfer money through the Palm Pilot. So the idea was that on your Palm Pilot, I can send you money. And if I send you money, then you can start to use it, and then you can send other people money. So they had a viral scheme that they would shoot you $5
Who were
on your
those
phone.
founders? Who were those founders?
So the person I'm talking specifically was Luke.
Luke, okay.
One of the early guys there. And of course, Reed was also there in the early days, and a lot of other great people were there. It was a great team of people, very smart.
Are you still in touch with some of those people?
Yeah, off and on. It's been so long. I'm so deeply involved in the ecosystem in Pakistan. I haven't been to the Valley now in quite some time, but email, social media, and LinkedIn. And a lot of them made a lot of money and actually exited and now are not doing stuff. And the people who are doing a lot.
आपने कब decide किया कि अब मैं नसीब start करता हूँ?
नसीब की तो जो story है.
Sorry, नसीब से पहले वो जो डे केयर का आपका स्टार्टअप था, वो कितनी देर रहा और वो कंटिन्यू क्यों नहीं हो सका, उसके नंबर्स के बारे में थोड़ा सा बताएं.
So e-daycare was, I had made up my mind that I needed to move away from hardware and chips into this new economy, this online economy, this internet economy. I was right in the middle. I saw it growing. This was the future. So I had to create new skills. And one of the things I did, I remember, was with my co-founder, who was also with me at Intel. We started playing with how to broadcast video live through this web browser, right? Abhi to bahut aasan hai. We're doing web streaming on Zoom. It's not a big deal. But at that time, it couldn't be done. So we got a camcorder, connected it to a PC, wrote some software, and there were some servers available, and we started streaming through a web browser, and it was just amazing. I remember I had the camera. At that time, I got an ISDN line, which cost me a lot of money. I think it was like $680 a month I would pay for this ISDN line in my home. And it was a 64 kbps line, right? I had a modem, a router for it, and I was really high tech. And I connected it to a camera, and I faced the camera on my street, and I would shoot my friends this IP address that they put in a browser, and they could see real time what was going on, and they could hear it. And it was just amazing. And I said, wow, we've discovered something miraculous. And first application ended up being daycare centers, because my partner had a daughter in childcare, and it was a big pain point. We said, let's start there. And so we went and we got 3,000 daycare centers up and running. I did the wiring. I remember crawling around on the floor, doing wiring, screwing in cameras, installing a server, teaching the ladies who ran the daycares to how to operate this, and trying to do a troubleshooting and creating a web application around it where you can watch your child while your child was in the daycare, raise a small amount of money from some amazing people, raised money from the Venture Frogs, which was Tony Shea and Alfred Lin, great guys who went on. They had invested in a company, a shoe store, which later became Zappos. And great guys, learned a lot from them. There was Joe, who started When.com, which was acquired by AOL, and he had invested. We had a number of great investors that we had learned a lot from. So that whole experience was really amazing. And what happened is, about a year after we started, we ran out of money. And things were changing so quickly that venture capitalists were investing in B2C plays, Then they said, no, B2B is it. We're no longer investing in B2C because they didn't play out well from the income stream perspective, advertising tanked. Then they went to exchanges. So there's a whole evolution. But basically, we ended up in a point where the dot-com crash happened because there was a dry up of investors investing in dot-com, because the internet hadn't fulfilled the promise that these investors were expecting in terms of revenue and valuation. So we were in a situation where we were practically out of money. And we realized it very late. It's my first time doing a dot-com venture. I'm like 27, 28 years old. I wasn't watching the money. And I remember we realized that we were almost out of money while driving for an investor meeting. And we did the math. We said, wait a second, we don't have any money in the bank. And there was panic. Long story short, we got acquired by a competitor in New York. I had to stay on for an additional few months because our stock was in escrow. It was a technology deal. I was a co-founder and CTO. So I stayed on. I did my jail time there. And then I began to think what to do next. And by that time, I had learned a lot. We'd seen a lot what was working. And these advertising-based B2C sites just were not working. And creating reasonable income, but subscription sites at that time were doing well, and these were like Hot Jobs and kind of Monster and Match.com and Yahoo Personals, and they were producing tremendous amounts of money. So it became clear that there were business models that worked really well on the internet, and classifieds was a great example. So around 9/11 happened. I was a Muslim in the US, and I saw a massive change in opinion and attitude and perceptions. And it became very frustrating always having to justify your identity and explain to people that, no, Islam is peaceful, and no, I'm not violent, I'm peaceful. No, I don't endorse the terrorists. And they're well-meaning people, but there was a tsunami of fear and a perception change about being a Muslim, where people were very insecure about speaking about themselves because they would be judged and labeled. And I think there was a fragmented group of Muslims in the US, 4 million, 5 million at that time, but they were spread across the country, and they had grown up there, they were born there, and now their identity was being questioned, and there was a massive need for people to interact with each other. And Naseeb.com was a social network. And the idea was to give people a forum, a platform to interact with each other, network professionally and socially. And this came on the back of, the early wave in social networking sites, which I was a part of. It all started with Friendster, this site called Friendster, which Reed had invested in. He said, hey, the growth is viral, it's friends of friends, and people are adding, it's growing like crazy. So when we launched Naseeb.com, we incorporated the friends of friends model. It grew very quickly. And, it went from Friendster, and Friendster couldn't scale because they had a technology stack that just wasn't scaling. You had to wait a minute and a half for a page to load because they had too many users. And they essentially had lost their edge. And then there was MySpace, which became everything. So Friendster was everything everybody was talking about. Then MySpace was everything everybody was talking about it. Then you had Orkut come in, and then you had Facebook come in. And then, so there's a whole evolution of these social networking sites that were fads of the day.
Okay, Monis, your Naseeb network is a bit of a mystery for me and for some other people in Pakistan as well, because we haven't seen it in Pakistan. Probably it is popular in other countries. Talk a little about that. And is it a dating website? Was it a dating website, or there was more to it?
So it was a platform to connect Muslims to each other, primarily the diaspora. And there was a massive need for that at the time, right after 9/11. And it employed a social network. So it grew very rapidly, but we targeted the diaspora. Even though I started it after moving back to Pakistan, we wanted people who had credit cards, essentially, and who could pay and who had a disposable income, because we planned to charge one day for it. And the wavelength of a diaspora, kind of a Muslim American-based, and a Muslim in India or here in Pakistan, there isn't that kind of a conversation fluency that happens. The wavelength is mismatched. So you wanted to aggregate like-minded people. These were people going to, educational institutes in the US, the colleges, etc., who wanted to meet each other. So it became a very vibrant social network, and many, many people started meeting and interacting. And when you have a social network, what happens? Well, love happens, It's just an inevitable kind of a consequence. And you see it on Instagram, you see it on Twitter, you see it on Facebook, So yes, so there was a lot of that going on. And it turned out that when we charged for subscription fees to meet people outside your immediate group of friends, the people who ended up paying were the people who were interested in finding a soulmate.
Yes.
So we turned on the subscription, and it turned out that it was wildly successful. We actually made quite a bit of money during that time, but I was operating in a small room of my house because when I moved back, I didn't have office. I had a very small amount of investment. I got some from Reed and a few of his friends, and I had my money and I opened up a little office in my house where I am right now. And we had 4 people and we grew from there, but it grew so quickly. And then when we started charging, we became cash rich. And so we got an office and we started growing. But I had never been to the US where all of our users were during this time. When I went to the US, I found out what a big deal it was. I would go out and people would introduce me and people say, oh my God, you're the guy who started it. And, and we found out so many of our friends and people we knew and people we knew other people who got married through the site. So it turned out to be a really big deal for that, from, I guess, around 2003 to about 2008, those 5 years, anybody in the US who was in their 20s and a Muslim would actually know about the site.
Okay, Monis, do you know Minder and Salams, the app Minder?
Yeah, I think all of these came later. I'm not really up to date. I absolutely have heard of it, but we quickly transitioned because we saw the opportunity in jobs after moving back.
Sorry, the reason I'm bringing up Minder is that Minder, the guy who runs Minder, the co-founder, Adil Raza, was in one of our podcasts before, last month. And he was saying that Naseeb sort of missed that mobile shift because he's on mobile, And actually, when I pushed out this question that, Monis Rahman is coming on the podcast, what question I should ask? And he said, ask him why he gave up on the seat because in mobile opportunity was even more because Tinder and other.
So a lot of things were happening. The mobile wave actually came later. So if you look at 2008 and what was kind of happening and the shift to mobile, this really accelerated quickly. But we had actually slowed down well before that wave hit.
Why
so it's not changing medium.
Why did you stop?
Because Naseeb was essentially a viral growth model, friends of friends. We had complete organic growth. We weren't paying to acquire traffic. So the numbers worked out really well. Then you had platforms like Facebook that came and that just ate everything up. And we saw that we were starting to charge people to interact and meet each other. And we didn't want to be a classic matrimonial site where you fill out forms and it matches. And that wasn't very interesting to me. And the business model of those sites is really acquisition. You pay $1 to advertise and acquire users and you make a profit of 20 cents on top of that. So it's just an acquisition arbitrage, how much you're paying to spend. So that was a model, and that's still the model right now. And that's not a model that really attracted me. Facebook came and Facebook was free. So a lot of our users migrated there. And at the same time, our jobs business started to grow. And I became more interested in the jobs business. I didn't want to, and we hadn't raised any investment. And I wasn't in the mood to raise any investment. And we realized that we had to spend a lot of money to acquire traffic. And so basically lost interest in that.
So I'm getting this feeling that is that your most successful startup in terms of money, in terms of ROI to date? Because if you're not spending money on advertisement, it's a great ROI.
It was fantastic. It was so much cash. It was great cash. I had a great time. I was here in the country in Pakistan. I had no expenses and the site was generating so much cash. It was fantastic. I was enjoying myself, flying out all over the world and traveling, and it was good. But then the jobs business became very interesting to me because I'd also seen the success of jobs in the US, Yahoo Hot Jobs and, Monster. And there was a massive need in Pakistan. And it was a big disruption when we came. There are about 2.3 million internet users in the country who mainly connected from offices. And jobs were advertised in newspapers, very inefficient, super expensive to advertise. And we needed to advertise because we were growing as an IT company. And so we created Rozee very quickly in 2 weeks. And when we created Rozee, we started putting our own jobs. Other people put their jobs. It grew very quickly. And we turned it into a business very fast. And another great experiment. So we scaled again. So we scaled with Naseeb. It made a lot of impact. Everybody was on the platform. Then we made Rozee. All of a sudden, everybody's on the platform. Companies are. And I became very interested in sort of B2B and getting more deeply entrenched inside the business world. And Rozee was a great opportunity to do that. We started to get inbound inquiries from investors to say, do you want to raise for your jobs business? And we weren't really interested in raising because we were cash flow positive, we were making money. But then I realized that in order to grow, raising funding would be helpful because this is really a sales oriented model. You need feet on the street to go and now get these organizations who had never advertised on the internet.
So getting the sales team was an innovative idea, and it works. Was it your original idea, or someone suggested that you hire the sales team and scale it quickly? And I remember at that time I was at LUMS, and you guys signed a deal with the institutes like LUMS as well. And I noticed that. So was that model, because it was so fundamentally different from what you have been doing before in Naseeb, no advertising, no sales team, and now all of a sudden there's a sales team. How did that happen?
Look, I've learned and made mistakes throughout my career. I knew I needed to build a sales team because in order to attract customers, you're instituting a behavioral change, right? Online users, you can put an ad on Facebook. There was no Facebook around that time in Pakistan that you could advertise online. And when you do behavior changes, it takes more than just a web ad. You have to really deeply engage the community against the first movers. And the behavior change takes time. It took a time for Rozee to actually get traction. And I remember I didn't draw salary for 3 years because we were completely free. And whenever we'd go to a company, we'd have to first convince them of the online opportunity, what the internet was, why on the internet, why place your job on the internet. And as we did this, we realized that we need a sales team. So it wasn't a model that we just copied and said, oh, let's do it. It was very iterative. And of course, we're seeing what's happening globally, how to build that sales team. Is it just one person? Is it 10 people? Do you tier the sales team? Do you also have a call center? How do you approach the higher clients? What's the engagement time with each organization? It was very complex. So through the Rozee journey, learned a tremendous amount about building sales team, managing them, scaling them, what they do well, what they don't do well, and feel armed with a wealth of information, particularly in the context of what we're doing in Pakistan.
From founder's point of view, I want to ask the technical question again, that after launching the Rozee, after how many months, after how much time did you realize that I need to have a sales team? Was it that because the revenue wasn't coming so quick and you then later on decided to have a sales team, or how did that decision happen?
What happened was we were free and we saw a massive amount of people using our platform, both professionals as well as organizations. But the moment you put a price tag on it, you had a number of problems. One, how do you collect the money? Online gateways was waqtini. There was no way to process a card. Actually, there was one organization, one bank that was offering it, the Citibank. And they had in their whole existence, I think, onboarded 9 organizations, PIA and the big ones. And I remember going to them, I was nobody. I was operating in my house, small room. And I said, I want access to Merchant Gateway. They said, who the hell are you? And I had to build a case. It took me 1 year. I pitched, went to Karachi, over here. And finally, I became I think the 10th or 11th company to get access to that. And we started charging. But then nobody had credit cards. To uska fayda kya hua? And so very quickly we realized we need feet on the ground. You have to go to their offices, you have to explain, you have to sell. So the moment you monetize, the sales team became important. So that was a realization there.
Yeah. Okay, so I remember then Park Wheels, I was working with Park Wheels as well. They had the sales model as well. And there's one question that's coming to my mind. There is another, it's question from a guy again. Do you know Chopal that these guys started at LUMS?
Sure, I know Chopal, I know Asim, I know Umar.
Were you at any time interested to invest in that?
Yes, I think so. I think in the early days, I saw their numbers were quite impressive, and there was a conversation in the early days about investing.
Yeah, there was. Okay, so that was the question. Yeah, and Asim said that I should ask you because to confirm. Okay, so
yeah, and I don't remember the details. And when you're in that, you're having so many conversations with so many people. But I was definitely impressed with how quickly they grew and the kind of stuff that was happening over there. And that's true for a lot of these early plays that happened around that time. Rozee was there a little bit earlier than everybody else. So, even at that time, even though we hadn't made that much scale, we were considered the online giant, which is not saying much, it was early.
Okay, again, another question about Rozee. And it's a question from a user, and it's also a question that I would have asked anyway, that Rozee, you get a feeling that Rozee is good for middle level jobs, but not good for high skilled jobs. Okay. And is that a fair question, or are we missing
The
something?
question's a very fair question. Absolutely, it's a fair question. So Rozee has 9.8 million professionals on the platform. It has 65,000 employers. It's processing 40,000 job applications a day. We've helped over 1 million people get placed into jobs. So scale's pretty massive. Now, we place people into the jobs that are advertised. So the majority of jobs that are advertised are not very senior level. It's not CEO level. I mean, how many CEOs do you even have in the in the country? So it is a reflection of the job market. We have placed many CEOs. We have placed many CXOs into banks. Right now we're helping BOP in Kisari, jo executive staff are underneath the president of the bank. We are hiring for that.
But I'm
We've
also
hired many CEOs,
I'm also
including
talking
banks.
about the middle level, high tech software jobs, marketing jobs, I mean, upper end technical jobs for graduates of the top institutes of Pakistan. So was that did you ever think that you should have a separate tier to cater for those audiences as well?
So look, the thing is that as the number of people become less and less in a certain category of the job market, the number of placements become less and less. So if you're hearing everybody hiring, sales executives and marketing people and software programmers through Rozee, and you're not hearing much about a CEO being hired, it's because the volume of those jobs is so low. But we have hired very senior people and Rozee now, and the way you hire a senior person and a junior person varies dramatically, right? If there's a junior person, they'll go to the web, they'll put information in the form, they'll apply for 20 jobs, they have time. But if you're going to find a seasoned executive, they're already very happy where they are. They're making a lot of money. They're not going to go and do 15 things for you, right? So what we do now is we have this executive search business and it's doing extremely well. And that's for high level. So that is like director, VP, CEO level. And we are doing massive amounts of placements in that. But that's more human intensive, where we call, we talk, we interview, we speak to them, and we do executive search. So it really varies on the tier that you're going after in the job market. And when I moved back, I remember, just so you know, Reed was starting his company as well around that time, LinkedIn. And when he was starting, he hadn't raised his institutional round, and he asked us to hire a couple of people for LinkedIn in Pakistan. So we had, I think, 3 people that we hired, or 4 people that we hired for Reed.
I think
so
Atif Aman was used to work with LinkedIn, but was he working?
Atif came much later in LinkedIn. Atif came way afterwards, right? I'm talking about the founding, the early days of LinkedIn, when it was just starting. We 8 log the, 9 log the. So Atif came much afterwards. So we had done a bit of the programming there for them. And so I knew about the LinkedIn model. It wasn't ready for us in Pakistan yet. So I'm very in tune with what's happening on the LinkedIn side and, globally what's happening in the job space.
Okay. Now that the technology has evolved a lot, and with that society has evolved a lot, Pakistan has evolved a lot. And with that, there is a need to sort of evolve Rozee.pk as well, with the way people find jobs and all that. Are you looking at what's the future trajectory of Rozee.pk going to look like? Are you focusing on that as well, or have you moved on from the job space in terms of spending your attention on the company?
No. Very much. I'm focused on Rozee, spending a lot of mind share there. But Rozee is a mature company now. We've got a great team. It runs itself to a large degree. But strategically, the growth areas of Rozee, executive search has turned out to be fantastic for us. We've had a record year last year, even despite lockdown, when for 4 months we had 0 sales almost for 4 months in lockdown. It was a very tough time, and it turned out to be an amazing year for Rozee. So Rozee is growing now, and very grateful for that growth that we've seen. A lot of it's coming on the back of COVID, and we're finding that we were always a bit ahead of our time in terms of things we expected people to do online, but now businesses are much, much more online savvy, right? When you see around you and see, well, what are the businesses that, have internet and do things on the internet, you can count a few hundred people, right? I'm talking about 65,000. So the moment you go in and push the envelope, now you're talking to people who've never really used the internet or have done anything on the internet, and trying to get them to do something is very tough. So अब उनमें से बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं who are now coming on themselves because now they're getting more internet savvy. We've seen a massive growth in internet. So that whole wave is coming underneath us on the Rozee side. We're doing a lot of B2B application software like ATSs and performance management suites and hiring workflows, and enterprises are beginning to absorb those. In addition to the classic job advertising and examining which CVs you got, we have engagements are going much deeper now because we've got the team and we've got the relationships with 65,000 employers. We're doing executive search, and we're doing so much more. So Rozee's at a fantastic spot at the center of this HR, employees and corporates. We've got all the data. We know people, we know what they do, we know where they live, we know how much they earn, we know what skill set they have, we know how frequently they switch jobs, we know organizations, who's hiring, who's not hiring, who's hiring in what area. There probably isn't a larger platform that's a local platform that has that much data.
Really? Okay, so good to know that Rozee is going to have a great future, and you're looking after that. And Chalo.pk के बारे में थोड़ी सी बात करते हैं. Chalo.pk से आपने evolve किया, and I read that you solved some native problems, like you mapped the cities in terms of houses कहाँ पे हैं. Was that your original effort, and was that done with collaboration with Google or some other company, and वो contribution का क्या बना और उससे आगे क्या opportunities निकली?
Yeah, so look, when you're in this ecosystem and the ecosystem starts evolving, you see so many opportunities. So these amazing opportunities just kept flying by, and you try to ignore them, and then you seize a couple of them and do these small experiments, in-house. And one of the big problems around that time was, trying to find places. It was very tough. And when I came, I didn't know Lahore. The first thing I did after I moved back was I actually acquired a paper map, and I would drive around and I'd try to find places. So we launched Naksha.pk, which was like a maps. We thought we'd be like Google Maps for Pakistan, and we employed a team, and we got satellite imagery.
Sorry, you have to mention year as well.
Probably 2005, 6, 7, which actually yaad bhi nahi hai. And so then we started mapping it, and that was in-house. So we created these layers on top of these images, and then we would click, and then we would get the housing maps from LDA and the societies and other people, and we try to overlay them on top of the satellite images and stretch the images to fit. And then we'd click and we'd put house numbers. We create a schema for housing. It was a great experience. And then very quickly we evolved that. Groupon was doing well. We said there's potential in Pakistan, so we created another platform on the back of that with Chalo, and we started to do group deals and learned a lot on this group deal model, and started engaging SMEs for that, and going to beauty salons and doing deals with them. A great experience.
Okay. Monis, how much time do you have? Because I have some strategic questions that I want to ask. I want to have like 10
We have 20 minutes left.
20 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes on Finja, and then 15 minutes on bigger level questions about our ecosystem. Okay, so 5 minutes on Finja. What specific problems will Finja solve that other payment systems have not solved?
Yeah, देखिए, Pakistan में we are starved of credit, both individuals and businesses, especially your small businesses. And if you go globally and see how much of the market is lent to, they're phenomenal numbers. In Pakistan, it's less than 2% of the market gets loans. Why? Because banks, which have the money and give loans, are giving their loans to the government because it's easy money. And the government has a voracious appetite for money. So if I'm a bank, I get my deposits, I throw them into the government, and I'm getting great income off of it. Everybody's really happy, and people are getting bonuses, and really no work is being done. But what happens is you starve your economy. And if you look at the country right now and you see our exports really haven't even grown much over the last kind of 10, 12 years. But the consumption has grown dramatically. We're not producing, we are consuming. And in order to fund businesses that produce and that supply, they need money because it's a cash flow issue at the end of the day, right? If I'm going to sell you something, I have to buy it first. And if I want to sell more of it, I need more cash to buy more so I can do sales. So this is a neglected sector, even for individuals like yourself. If you were to go out and ask for a loan at a bank, it'd take you 2 months, 3 months. You'd have to leave them your house papers, car papers. The whole world has evolved well beyond that. So what Finja does is it's using these fintech rails, and we are creating unsecured instant loans, scoring them on data. And we've done this very successfully. We've processed over 23,000 loans completely on smartphones without seeing the people that we're actually giving loans to. We have 2 lines of loans. One is the Kriana stores and SMEs. These are unsecured loans. We've gotten very good at scoring them, understanding how they work. And then the other line is the salaried individuals, people who draw a salary. We've got a good way of predicting their income, their ability to absorb capital, and their ability to repay. So we've invented this kind of category. We're the first ones to do this. And that's growing rapidly. We have a pilot. We're the first ones to get a pilot launch approval from State Bank for EMI, a license that State Bank has launched, which we can run a wallet, of our own. And then we've got a license from SECP where we can give loans and lending. And it's an amazing team, over there as well with
okay. Will you lend to the will you lend to the startup people like me as well? If I'm running a small app and I have a business, I have some revenue, will you lend to me as well?
It depends on your revenue and your expenses and how long you were able to, how profitable you are and how long you have been profitable. And if you're losing money every month, but you've got a business plan and saying, well, I'm going to start to make a lot of money in 8 months, we're not going to give you a loan, then you need to talk to VCs.
Yes.
Because that's beyond the risk appetite of a lending company.
Okay.
We're trying to grow your business, so we give productive loans.
Where will your money come from?
So the original loans came from our own loan book. So it came out of our own equity. We raised funding, and from that we would allocate a percentage to loans. But now what's happening is we've plugged into many banks. So a lot of banks have been approaching us to give us their loan book, and we get a percentage of the profit on the loans. And we also have a percentage of the risk on those loans. So that's scaling very well. So now we have a massive loan book, and we are scaling very, very quickly. And we're, our AI algorithms, our ability to process data, our ability to translate offline risk into an online medium and score it has really improved dramatically. So all of this has been happening. Finja has a very, very bright future. If you see the growth, even during lockdown, we showed phenomenal growth, and we showed, just very, very strong health in the portfolio.
Yeah, I wish you good luck on Finja, because you've got the great team. You have got the entrepreneur, you, and then the Kasif Shahid has got the banking background, and I'm sure it's a great fit, and it will have a great future. I wish you good luck. Now, I want you to put your strategic hat on and let's talk about the industry. Let's talk about the ecosystem in Pakistan, the goods and the bads. How can we move forward and fix those whatever issues we have? And the first question I want to ask you, are you looking back for 2-3 decades in the industry when you have been involved with, have we grown to our potential, or have we missed a lot of things, or the potential जो हमारा था ecosystem का, उसको हमने maximum तरीके से utilize किया है, या हमने major shifts, major चीजें miss की हैं?
This is an evolutionary journey. This is like a handi. When you put the handi on the stove, when you say, yaar, abhi tak nahi hua, usme waqt lagta hai. And the state of the ecosystem, we're all learning how long it takes. It takes a while, but you're also seeing how quickly now things are changing rapidly. It was very slow. I've been here since 2003, and I was the only one doing this. It was a lonely journey. Now, all of a sudden, ye jo handi hai na, it's cooking, man. It's brewing, and the flavors are smelling beautiful. So this is the time. So have we reached our potential? No. Do we have a lot of potential? We have a tremendous amount of potential, enormous amount. And now we're starting to realize that. So this is the most exciting place and exciting time. I was there too early. I was there trying to break down walls and get people to post a job on the internet. I would have to talk to these EVPs, SEVPs at kind of banks and convince them to post jobs online, and they would have their assistant give them all my emails in a folder in a binder. So this is a mentality shift. Ab wo din to chale gaya. I don't have to tell anybody, yaar, internet is a great place to do things. That was the argument you had to make before. Ab ye smartphone ki growth itni aayi hai. We've added 50 million smartphone users in the last 3 years. So the kinds of things that you can do right now, and of course the payment, ecosystem. When I started Finja, we were the first ones ever in the country to launch a smartphone-based mobile wallet that created a bank account for you in under a minute. This all came later. We created the rails for that, the KYC for that. We did the first QR code transaction on a retail outlet. So ab ye sare rails aa gaye. Ab Easy Paisa hai, Jazz Cash also entered afterwards on their smartphone apps. They're using the same rails that we created with State Bank. And now you're seeing that ye rails ho gayi hai, the plumbing is there, internet's growing, the policy is growing along with it. State Bank ko dekh lein, how quickly these guys are evolving. SECP ko dekh lein.
अच्छा मोनिस, दो पाकिस्तानी guys हैं. One is Matahir Khan and one is Zahid. They have been researching on our startups and especially the money that they raise and how many startups have been successful historically. मैंने उनसे बात की है and they are coming on my podcast in future as well. Detail में भी बात होगी. उनकी research ये कहती है एंड उनकी रिसर्च ये कहती है कि हिस्टोरिकली मिस्टीरियसली हमारे बहुत से स्टार्टअप्स ने पैसे रेज किए हैं और वो 1-2 साल बाद गायब हो जाते हैं इस रेडार से.
लेकिन that shouldn't be a surprise. If anybody is surprised by that, then they're naive. आप US में देखें how much capital was raised in startups. $1.5 billion a month in the Valley alone. How many of those made it? Very small percentage. Yeah, this is part of the ecosystem. And we have to get off this horse and say, wo to fail ho gayi thi, ye bhi fail ho gayi, ye bhi fail ho gaya, itna paise raise kiya. Oh bhaijan, this is how this ecosystem works. You have to try and iterate. And who tries? It's not the CEOs of banks and the large organization who have this appetite. It's these fearless entrepreneurs. And they're going to fail and they're going to succeed. But failure is necessary for success because you're doing things that have never been done before. So this is a very humorous comment. Fair
enough. My interest is to try to sort of do those conversations where we try to understand what are the mistakes that are inherent in the ecosystem that we can avoid in the future. For example, Mutahir Khan ने कल ट्वीट किया कि पाकिस्तान में जो पिछले 5 सालों में पैसे रेज हो रहे हैं ना, it's like 90% of the founders are foreign educated. Fine, I have no problem with that. It's okay. But the question is, the converse question is, why aren't the homegrown graduates, producing those kind of startups? Lums hai.
Yeah, look, this is evolution. Don't be impatient with this. This is a handi. It's cooking. You're saying ki yaar abhi tak isme flavor kyun nahi aaya? Oh yaar, you have to wait. After it brews a certain amount, this is a osmosis hota hai. The people who raise money first are the people who understood it, who were exposed to it, who maybe had experience doing it, who moved back to Pakistan, who understood the internet economy because it was non-existent in Pakistan. So they had an inherent advantage. But now, as people from the local ecosystem work in those organizations, grow and get groomed and have access to VCs who are entering. I was the first one to ever bring a VC into the country. It was a tremendously difficult task to attract VC into Pakistan. It's much easier now. The number of deals and the VC funds who have entered is massive, right? So now you're starting to see those homegrown, entrepreneurs. And I'll tell you, the homegrown entrepreneur has a massive advantage over the guy that flies in on a parachute and saying, "Gee, main to Harvard mein tha, ab main aa gaya hu idhar, ab I'm going to be the king," right? So that advantage is getting less and less over time with people who understand the problems, who've grown up with the problems, who speak the local language, who know how business works, who have the interconnects. So I think that's going to shift very quickly.
Okay.
There's no substitute for high quality education. And high quality education is predominantly more available outside Pakistan than inside Pakistan.
Fair enough. Talk about the collaboration opportunities. Has it become easy to collaborate and trust people in Pakistan now? And is that like a lot of people are doing great work, but some people have that hesitation that somehow we people are not mature enough to collaborate and produce those things. Do you want to comment on that?
देखिए, there is such an inferiority complex कि यार हमने जब किया तो सारे स्टार्टअप्स फेल हो गए, हमने तो नहीं किया कुछ, हमारा जो डीएनए है उसमें we can't do, पार्टनरशिप्स नहीं होते, हम तो ऐसे हैं, वो उधर हैं. So we beat ourselves up, and this is a colonial kind of a mindset, and we need to throw this in the garbage as quickly as we can. This is not helpful to anybody. Partnerships बहुत सारी हो रही हैं अब. You can't do a partnership if you're the only one in the space or nobody understands it. But now you're seeing, for example, I'll give you an example with us on Finja and also with Rozee. We've done so many partnerships with so many organizations. Finja is now doing partnerships with very large banks. What's Finja? It was a small fintech with 2 or 3 people who started it. And most banks have very large egos. Bhai, I'm a big bank. I have these many, my branches and my customers, and I have a AUM that, in the billions, trillions. So now we're seeing banks are reaching out to fintechs for partnerships. This is amazing shift that we're seeing.
Good for you. Last question.
And VCs are flying into Pakistan. The number of VC deals done in the last year without those VCs flying in to meet the entrepreneurs is amazing. People are investing on Zoom calls now for the opportunity in Pakistan. So partnerships ho rahi hain. Things have changed.
ठीक है. Good to know. We'll learn from you on this. And secondly, the last question. कौन सी पाकिस्तान में इंडस्ट्रीज है जिनमें डिस्ट्रप्शन बहुत स्पीड से होगी ओवर द कमिंग ईयर्स, और कौन सी इंडस्ट्रीज हैं जिनका टाइम इज अप? I mean, talk about that. पाकिस्तान के इकोसिस्टम को देख के, बैंकिंग है, you've got education, you've got a lot of other industries. कहाँ पर you see के inflection point आ रहा है, बहुत तेजी से change आएगी वहाँ पे?
देखिए, obvious areas that you're seeing, and I think we're seeing it in the market. There is e-commerce is still massive growth, right? E-commerce size in Pakistan, if you add up all the sellers, Facebook, small sellers, it's about $4 billion, which is about 1.2% of our overall retail sales in Pakistan. India, it's 8% of retail sales. US, globally, the average is about 15% of retail sales. So if you extrapolate that out, e-commerce has a long way to grow. And e-commerce ke andar bahut se opportunities hain, avenues hain. You've got the supply chain, you've got the payment space, you've got AI bhi aa jata hai, you've got the marketing in there, acquisition. So the whole ecosystem inside e-commerce are lots of layers. And if you grab that right layer, I think, you're great. The game isn't over. We have a giant in Pakistan with Daraz, but the market is still untapped, really, right? So who cares if there's a giant? But having the right skills and the right resources to win in e-commerce is something that people need to master if they're going to enter this area. Then fintech is obviously huge. I'm in all of these areas because I find them exciting. So fintech is also a huge ecosystem, from the lending to the payments to insurance, huge opportunity. I think ed tech is one of the most impactful untapped opportunities in Pakistan. Educating our masses on the back of these 85 million smartphones, finally being able to teach somebody to read and write because of what information and how you interact with them on their smartphone, it could have a huge impact. So ed tech I think is largely untapped, huge opportunity. Areas that I think are suffering and probably may not thrive as much as, for example, travel is very tough right now with kind of the COVID crisis. Things will ease up later on and all of that kind of stuff. But, on that same side, the travel agency wala jo model hai, I think these guys are clearly in trouble. Everybody knows that. Any brick and mortar business that's highly fragmented is in trouble, because what the internet does is it lets the leading player aggregate and very quickly become the giant in a fragmented space. So whatever fragmented spaces you're seeing, there's an opportunity for online to make a huge impact there.
Okay, last question. हाँ, हमारी पॉडकास्ट के बारे में कुछ हमें सजेशंस दे, किन लोगों को इंटरव्यू किया जाए, क्योंकि आई एम सीरियस अबाउट लास्ट 2-3 डेकेड्स की हिस्ट्री को मैं रिकॉर्ड करना चाह रहा हूँ. जैसे हमने आपकी पास्ट को डिस्कस किया है, किन और प्लेयर्स को मुझे लेके आना चाहिए पॉडकास्ट में? गिव मी सम सजेशंस.
Yeah, I think where things started, there was an amazing individual who's no longer around. I wish he was. You should speak to him. He was a warrior in the early days. That was Dr. Altamash. He expired. I think he was the first one to build e-commerce on a bookstore, which was just amazing at that time, and way, 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 way ahead of his time. You've got a lot of players. I think the people who started initially came in with rocket internet and graduated out and spawned and did a few other things. These are people to talk to. Most of the individuals who are now doing VC funded organizations, they've done some impactful work to be able to attract those high quality investors in the evolutionary space. You should talk to people in like telco space, like Zuhair Khalik, who really is one of the pioneers, I think, inside a telco space. And on the back of the growth that they exhibited, they laid the rails for online, like
But
all of the towers that were laid, the fiber that was laid.
Sorry, telcos comes under the software, because I'm focusing on software at the side of businesses for now.
Yeah, but if you're looking at history, these online plays wouldn't have existed unless we had all of the towers up and the telcos with 4G and 3G. All of this came later. The fiber that was laid in the country, the internet user growth came on the back of the growth of telcos. That was a fundamental kind of building block and infrastructure needed. So I think that's also very instructive to see. So, I think there's some great organizations that have come and gone, and the success of that organization shouldn't be judged as the metric for the impact the organization made. There are a lot of organizations earlier on that made tremendous impact and allowed the evolution to go, and may not have been as profitable or successful.
Yeah,
but they're very much a part of the journey. And what you find is these entrepreneurs who do these things and they graduate, they get superpowers every time they do this, and they get stronger and stronger. And there's some great people in the ecosystem who are doing new things, who are now have new resources and tools to play with that they did not have when they initially started. And they're getting very good at plugging these into each other and creating great organizations.
Thank you very much, Monis Rahman. I'm really happy, and I cannot thank you enough. I feel I've done something big because, like I said in my second podcast, I get the great Monis Rahman. Thank you very much for your generosity, and I will, forever remember this. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on this.